What games you can buy.
Yep.
The answer sadly is not Steam, it's not developers, and it's not even governments, because this week actually proved that it's MasterCard. They can fine platforms $200,000 for selling games with, quote, no artistic value, because apparently MasterCard are the judges of artistic value. But here's what MasterCard did not expect.
You hear that, guys? Visa and MasterCard is now the ultimate judges of what we consider artistic value. A bunch of old fat businessmen, they have now called themselves the master of everything artistic. And if they don't like anything that they consider not artistic value, they can literally blackmail you or fucking destroy your company from doing any sort of business. Does that sound fun? That sounds amazing. Holy shit, guys. You know, sometimes I'm not trying to bring out anything, but sometimes I feel like, what's the guy? The Mangione guy. You know, sometimes when you look at what he did, again, it is not justified. I am not justifying anybody going to kill anyone. That's insane and you shouldn't be doing that. But sometimes when you hear situations like this and you see all this fucking dumbass CEOs, I kind of understand why he did it, And this is one of the situations right here. Why people have gone insane. Again, I'm not condoning anything. You shouldn't be going around shooting people. That's insane. It's just crazy. Now, it's just games. It starts with games. And then, if this actually goes through and Visa, MasterCard can actually start blocking people from buying stuff and platforms from selling stuff, what if all of a sudden they just didn't like a genre of a movie? They didn't like superhero movies. They didn't like the color black. They didn't like, I don't know, white maybe, because I don't know what the fuck's going on there, but and they realize that they can just blackmail everyone from selling anything, stuff like that. It's becoming very dystopian. You guys kind of understand what I'm trying to get at, right? It starts with something as small as games, and then it can grow eventually because they realize that everyone would just fold to them and they'll do whatever they want with you, and maybe even one day they will be coming to you and telling you, you know what, Visa, MasterCard, you've used our card for 5 years and we believe that you owe us money for using our plastic card. Then you start, deducting money from your card. Stuff like that. I hope that never happens. It's very dystopian, but it's stuff like that could happen if they are allowed to get away with this. They think they have so much power that they can control your money, and everything that you own basically that has a Visa, MasterCard on it. Maybe we should get some, legislation over there in the US. You guys need to clamp down on this bullshit. This is ridiculous.
They did not expect thousands of gamers flooding their call centers and that actually working. And with that happening, the payment processors are beginning to crack. They should. Valve making big statements. The payment processors even finally admitted a little bit of a truth that lies beneath all of this. It's a humongous story, and so it's actually understandable. We've got to begin with Collective Shout. Let's start with the people who kicked this off. Activision group Collective Shout decided to set the record straight. Obviously, they really did kick quite the hornet's nest. So, they say that they're fighting false claims and misinformation, and here's their story, at least as they present it. They say they only reached out to payment processors after Steam ignored them since April, and their post stresses something that they say is very important. The Collective Shout never asked itch to remove all adult content. Just
wait. Hold on. So what I'm understanding is this Collective Shout is a activist group. I don't be mean, but the person who was in front of that looked like a fucking Karen. I'm just gonna say this: a bunch of Karens complained about Steam having games that they didn't like. They complained it over to Visa, MasterCard, that Steam was ignoring them, and then right after this is when the entire chaos started to happen.
April, and their post stresses something that they say is very important. The Collective Shout never asked itch to remove all adult content, just content that involved sexualized violence and torture of women. Now that is content that's actually illegal in some territories. Now what they said here is partially true, but there's a little bit of a problem. Their original call to action explicitly framed these platforms as specific.
Okay, so this shows it. The basically Collective Shout, they basically went to payment processors and screamed, Karen, I want to see the manager, and said that you should shut down all games. Again, I will agree. Games like rape, incest, child abuse games, all those weirdo games like gore and stuff, like murder, or glorifying, like, I don't know, cannibalism, games like that. We shouldn't be making those games, and those games should not be for kids, because this group basically asking payment processors to not facilitate payments of this. This is where shit hit the fan, I would say. So after that, Visa and MasterCard went on a crazy rampage to literally start removing stuff that they personally don't like as well. I would not 100% blame collective Karens for this. I think in my opinion, Visa, MasterCard had already was trying to make this happen, but they had to find a way that does not make them look like a bunch of goons, basically. I guess Collective Shout came along and they were like, you know what? We could use this very moment to start putting down our agendas and start banning people from buying stuff that we personally think we don't like. It was already in the work. Collective Karens just came along and basically made it a thing. And now Collective Karen is basically saying, oh wait, no, we didn't say that we want to do this and that. You should never reach out to a bunch of old businessmen, you know, who have no idea what they're doing in the particular space and ask them to regulate a space which they have no knowledge about, you know, because all they would do at the end is they would regulate the space as they see fit. And majority of the time when they say as we see fit, it's for their own profits and their own gain. And then in this particular case, it's to have control over your money, basically.
Facilitating child abuse game sales. That's the thing. They didn't just say specific games. They said platform. They targeted the platforms. Yep. And that's the sort of content that would be globally illegal. And therefore, very good reason for payment processors to act swiftly. So, what's really happening here? How do we actually break this down? Essentially, right, Collective Shout wants to take credit for their win, but they also want to deflect blame for how it actually played out in the real world. They basically say that they wanted specific games to be removed, but they never back that up by actually mentioning what those games are. And then they imply that they couldn't predict how Steam and itch would react to what they did, that masses of games would end up being purged. But here's the thing, Collective Shout. Don't patronize us. You've used payment processors before. We know you know how this works. But at least for now, they're simply deflecting blame. They're arguing that itch didn't have to purge everything. But here's the problem. Realistically, they're wrong. Itch pretty much had no choice. It's a sensitive topic, but itch has talked just about as much as they're able to. With single-digit stats.
Look, I think I understand what they were trying to do. They're not trying to just be some random Karens and just scream and shout and, you know, the typical thing. They had good intentions, but here's my problem with this activist Karens, right? Number one, they always have good intentions. I agree that majority of the time they won't just scream and shout for no reason. But the thing is, they never use their brains. I mean, if you really use your brain and made like a proper plan of how you decided to track down on particular games, they would have not asked the payment processors to target the platforms. They would have maybe said particular developers, because it's quite easy to track the developers of these weirdo games, because if they want to sign up with like a Steam or something like that, they would have their information. Maybe Visa and MasterCard and maybe Steam would have actually tried to work with them instead, of just shutting everything down and just hitting the nuclear button, basically. That would have been the most easiest steps to do. They fucked everything up. They pissed off all the gamers. All the gamers that are coming after them, and they'd be like, oh, it's not our fault. We all we did was, you didn't think about strategies, nothing. You just scream and shout. This is the problem I have with activists. If activists actually has a plan and outcome and all the usual planning stuff, people would actually support them because they would have a goal, they would have an idea, they would have an outcome, stuff like that. People want to see things on paper, a proper layout, not just scream and shout. That is what makes people hate them a lot more than they should get hate for.
They're essentially juggling angry developers, rightly angry developers, and a bunch of technical problems on the platform. Certainly doesn't look fun. And we've got this July 28th FAQ that explained their lack of options. Essentially, right, because itch is an open platform, they couldn't just remove specific games like Steam does. That's because they simply don't know about every game, because it's an open platform. They have a single-digit staff count. So in an ideal world, creators would just be honest about everything, and that would solve the issue.
That's never going to happen.
That does not work at scale. So they essentially felt that mass de-indexing basically had to happen. At least that's their point of view. But itch does say that those games, they've been de-indexed. They're not gone. So here's what they maintain. The de-indexed or delisted content should still be available to users. That's of course as long as creators haven't went and removed the pages themselves. Now there's been confusion here, and that's down to some games. Consume Me, Last Call, and Mouthwashing were flagged by players and press. But what's odd is those games were already de-indexed before any of this stuff started. Itch's position is basically that if you lost access to a game completely, then something is wrong and you should contact them, because it ain't supposed to be like that. But then there's the payment processor problem, and that follows a similar logic. People basically pointed out their policy of withholding payments from banned accounts. Itch responded to that, saying, "We have no interest in withholding anyone's earnings."
Yep.
Basically, that policy existed before this crisis, and it exists to stop grifters from breaking their rules and profiting. It's just that in light of everything that's happened over the last fortnight, it's, not exactly ideal. But at least for now, they're trying to look forward, so here's basically what they've updated us with. They've tried talking to payment processors, and they've gotten a list of problematic topics, and all of those topics are now banned on their store. That is, of course, even though not all those topics are illegal. And you'll need to remember that distinction, because we'll come back to it later in the video. Because, fortunately for your content listening and watching experience, that's just the start. So come back to it later.
Wait, I want to see what Visa and MasterCard deems illegal in their mind. Let me see. Non-consensual content, real or implied. Underage or barely legal theme. Just be honest and say underage minors out. This stuff is, I'm not into any of this shit. Like, there are people who are into it, but if I don't think it's like outright illegal, right, for all of this. What if in a situation they are talking about, let's just say it's a detective game whereby a person was solving a rape case, and then maybe you play the POV of the rape victim, or you play as the rapist. I think there's been games like that, but it's to tell a story or to bring emotion into the game. You know, is that considered illegal? It's more of like a situational thing in this situation. It depends how it is being depicted. Look, in the first place, payment processors are not allowed to ban you from using your money wherever you want to. I think that it should be illegal, except if it's fucking super illegal. I think stuff like that is fine to be banned, but like, if it's not regulated by the government to be banned, people should be allowed to do whatever they want with their money and buy whatever they want with it. Visa and MasterCard, if you are payment processors, stay as a payment processor and don't try to come out and act like some kind of virtue police or something like that. You're nobody, basically. No one should be listening to you, and the government should be freaking regulating them and should be actually investigating this rubbish. You know,
and you'll need to remember that distinction, because we'll come back to it later in the video. Because, fortunately for your content listening and watching experience, that's just the start. So here's the latest development. They've actually found out how to get around this whole problem. Basically, Itch can now re-index free adult content. The reason why is real simple. If the game's free, then payment processors aren't involved, so they can't complain. And that means that going forward, there's going to be a new system. Content warning tags for anything marked not safe for work. And this will basically help the Itch team start to rebuild paid access to tagged games. Because those games are going to be back, and Itch is already reaching out to new payment processors. Ones that perhaps may be comfortable.
This is the best. They're becoming so comfortable with your money. Maybe it's time that we look for different payment processors. Give them some competition. Everyone just completely stops using Visa, MasterCard. There is other payment processors out there who are working and running their platform as intended, as payment processors. I'm pretty sure we can find something that can replace them. It's not that hard. It's just that Visa and MasterCard has been there for the longest time and they're most convenient. You know, it's 2025. I'm pretty sure that other payment processors has already reached the level whereby they are as good as Visa and MasterCard. They're just not as openly well known as them just yet.
With these products. They're also, of course, getting some hard definitions from existing partners because, hey, no one likes a soft definition. And that brings us to Stripe. They were nice and hard. They're a titan of the digital payment industry.
Let's see.
Their position in this actually does matter. And they told Itch they can't process anything for gratification, but more importantly, two things. One, they explain why. And two, responding to all this, Valve talked. And because of that, I'm beginning to understand what the hell is going on. Valve usually say very little until they're absolutely forced, but Obviously, it's been a spicy few weeks, and they've taken quite a lot of actions. And that means we've got a perfect case study.
I want to hear what Vale has to say.
Lovely name for a lovely game. It's from a solo dev and boutique horror publisher called Dread XP. And this game was close enough to release to actually have reviews in the press.
Wow.
But it's now not going to launch in Steam. The store page? Gone. The 3,000 plus wish lists? Deleted. And that blows because that is a real asset for a game developer. And honestly, if you're not in Steam, you're really going to struggle in sales. Now, all this happened after bouncing around the approval process for a month, and the denial reason was this, quote, sexual content with depictions of real people. But here's what's important, right? And it's weird. Vile Exhumed is a horror game that's not meant to be exploitative.
Firstly, what type of sexual content is it? Let me just go back a little bit. Sexual content with depictions of real people. That is so broad. That should not be banned depending on the situation of what is in the game and what the depiction was. Just cause this thing was too hot, we're not gonna let you release your game. I mean, can you even do that? Are you even allowed to do that shit? Again, I'm not an expert in this, but that sounds really fucking dumb to me. And I don't think this is a Valve problem. This is probably because MasterCard and Visa was
with depictions of real people. But here's what's important, right? And it's weird. Vile Exhumed is a horror game that's not meant to be exploitative. It's basically one of those fake desktop indie games.
Oh.
The whole thing is you unpack a mystery through FMVs and text logs. It explores misogyny and parasocial relationships via implied adult content. Now, the point is the player should feel uncomfortable. That's entirely the point. And it should have sailed through approval when you look at its content, especially with...
So, it's not even real people. It was just a depiction of particular situations that may happen. So it's just a hypothetical thing, and they said that there was a sexual content between real people.
But why? Why would you do that? Why would you do any of that?
Fucking Visa and MasterCard.
An established publishing partner. But this week it didn't. And without a statement from Valve, we really couldn't know what's happening internally. So the good news is we do have a statement.
Oh, we do,
Valve.
finally.
To hit Valve's response, I first got to tell you what they've responded to. So MasterCard put out a public statement on, quote, recent headlines on gaming content. Hello. Anyway, they explicitly deny asking any platform to restrict sales. And they say that they haven't actually evaluated a individual game. Their claim...
First thing, whatever they're writing here, don't believe a single word they're saying. This is full of shit. You know, I hate it when these fucking companies all write this jargon of rubbish saying that, it's not our fault. It's because at the back, if you don't listen to MasterCard, they can fine you. So they don't need to actually come and tell you to remove this particular game. Now, MasterCard didn't technically tell them to take down this particular game, but they've already stated it before that they don't want this there. If not, you're gonna get problems. Like, not the game, but the genre. So in that sense, they've already told them in the past that they don't want this and this. Therefore, if anything like this ever comes up, you know what to do. Basically, it's like a wink wink, and like in that sense, they have already indirectly said that they don't want this game on the platform. Even though they don't know what the game is, but they already know that that's the content and that it fits the description of what they don't like. So that was the problem there. And I'm pretty sure Steam is going to out them for this.
Is they allow all legal products to be sold. They only ban illegal purchases. Visa actually told customers the same thing, which would certainly make the last few weeks really confusing, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Because lots of perfectly legal content has been delisted from these stores.
Yep.
And, well, that is why Valve
kind
of just went and shot MasterCard and Visa down.
Yep.
Almost immediately.
Let's see it.
Valve released a rare
interested.
statement to Kotaku, and here's what they revealed. MasterCard refused to talk to them directly. So that blows. Instead, what happened is MasterCard talked to their network of payment processors and banks, and then those middlemen then went and talked to Valve. And they basically refused to accept Valve's own content policy. They said that Valve must follow MasterCard's rule 5.12.7, which is...
Yep, that's what I thought. And it's even more scummier. They know they'll get in trouble. So basically what I didn't know MasterCard had holds on banks as well. That is new for me. Apparently, Visa and MasterCard has been going behind people's backs using third parties. Basically, I would say this. Basically, they are calling their lackeys and they're doing their dirty work. They're getting all the heat while Visa and MasterCard acts like they're not doing anything. But in reality, they're the ones who are actually pulling all the strings. They think they have a monopoly of everything just because people use their stuff and they think they can do whatever they want. Somebody in the government needs to go over there and fucking knock them over the head. They have the balls to tell Steam that they don't want to follow Steam's own policy, but they want Steam to follow MasterCard's policy. That is insane. Imagine if one day Nike decided they don't like Asians, and then he goes to all the payment processors and he goes to the banks and stuff like that and say, do not sell Nikes to Asians. If you sell Nikes to Asians, I will have to fine you 200,000. I don't care about your rules. I don't care about your company. You follow my rule. That's basically what's going on, right? Like I'm saying it in the most layman terms or the layman ways of saying it. Who the fuck are they to imply their own rules onto people's companies? They are nobody. It should not be happening and this should not be a thing.
Thrilling. What's that rule? Well, that rule does ban illegal content, sure, but it also says any content that, quote, reflects negatively on MasterCard can be banned.
Yeah.
Or, this is the real banger, content that, quote, lacks serious artistic value. I'm really glad that they are the people who now, yes, judge what serious and unserious artistic value is. Cool. Awesome.
That is such a fucking egotistical thing to say. We are now the masters and we know what artistic value truly is. Okay, buddy. Okay, sir.
The payment processors are now the judges of art. Fantastic.
Oh my
And if you
God.
breach that rule, MasterCard can revoke your ability to process transactions and impose a 200 grand fine. And that's where this all falls apart. It's also why Rule 15 exists on Steam. That was the rule, if you remember, basically said any content that may break payment processor rules, that Valve basically can kick that off Steam.
Yep.
Because, well, turns out this, what we just talked about, explains why Valve said may break.
I love it. Valve just straight up out them. MasterCard and Visa was like fucking rats trying to lie their way out of it and saying, it's not our fault, it's the platform. The platform did it. And then Valve was like, go fuck yourself. Literally. Valve, I mean, honestly, they don't really have a hold of Valve. I think Valve knows that. So they just kind of told them to go fuck themselves. Literally gave them the finger. This is amazing. I love it. Valve, Lord Gaben, he is definitely our Lord and Savior.
Really blows. Now, the content that's been removed, well, unless you're in specific territories looking at specific games, it's legal. And this is where Stripe then come in. Stripe confirmed this in their response to Itch. They said they can't process anything related to gratification. And the reason why? Well, according to Stripe, it's restrictions placed on them by their banking partners. Not by the law, by banking partners. Because ultimately, it's about risk management.
Banking partners. Okay, now it seems a bit more realistic. They are trying to act like they are basically the law. It's quite insane. I don't know why the US government has not cracked down on this already. Unless, in my opinion, because I'm not from the US, so I have no idea what's going on there. Unless the US government is also in on this, it could be a government thing as well. They're working together to try to control what we own. I can see where the conspiracy theories would come. Rubbish, I don't know what's going on.
PR risk of being targeted by groups like Collective Shout. So, hello again to you guys. But there's also a higher risk of chargebacks on
collective
adult
Karens
products. And this would be one of the unit economic problems that we'd be dealing with here. And as GameIndustry.biz highlighted, basically they're losing money on refunds from embarrassed customers. But I think what's kind of key is that over these last few weeks, the real challenge to this whole system has actually been you. Turns out rebellions can kind of work. So the internet exploded with stories. YouTube did. It was quite a time. People were reaching out to Visa and MasterCard, just inundating their call centers.
That's
so
good.
you're working in a call center. Maybe you're a robot. Who knows? But just legions of gamers over the horizon, flooding lines. Now, This then meant that scripts circulated because, as you know, call centers all rely on scripts. And because people got scripts, well, we're gamers. We made guides. So you basically end up with people having guides on how to reach various departments. And this would cover things like the right keywords to say. And the overall approach was never be aggressive, feign ignorance to waste their time. And some people even found a few allies working.
Look, if you're trying to make responses to gamers, know this: gamers will always find a way to counter that bullshit. We have made guides throughout the years. We know how to get through your bullshit. I think this is a good thing. You know, this is what we should be doing. We shouldn't be using violence. We should be using phone violence by spamming their call centers, you know, asking them to respond and, you know, bombard them. I guess that's the right way to do it. It's one way of doing it. It's one way of doing it.
And what really pushed this is that many of the plans and many of the guides for dealing with these companies, well, those came from artists and creators. And the reason why is those people have already been forced from sites like Gumroad. So basically, they've seen this whole playbook before. But this time, what's a bit different is we're actually seeing a real impact. As an example, Aftermath tracked the pattern over time, and as more and more call center resources got eaten up, the responses from these companies changed. And per their source, they went from, quote, respectful to defensive with each passing day. Others reported something that's also interesting.
That's when you know you won. That's when you know you won. You know, these companies that like to give you all this paper cookie cutter responses. You know, they all, oh, we respect, we understand, we have read your concerns. To defensive, you know, you pissed them off. That feels so good. You know you won.
That across multiple calls, they got different scapegoats as for who was actually to blame here. So the pressure just kept on building. These companies then felt forced to address mainstream headlines because it turned out that their whole policies designed around avoiding bad PR led to them getting bad PR.
Exactly.
Because whenever someone like me can sit down in the internet and say, hey everyone, MasterCard now get to decide what is or is not artistically valid, that's obviously pretty bad for them. Now, what all of this pressure did is kind of reveal the truth here. That this is not happening because of laws. It's happening because of these companies' policies. Now, these are private companies, and they are deciding how stores work. They're deciding how art gets distributed and what even is constituted as art. Now, Itch found a shortcut here to distribute free content, and that would essentially work for now. It's a stopgap measure. Maybe some people could accept donations. Or maybe you could find some of the more, you know, just full liberal, do whatever you want, payment processors, right?
There is a lot of payment processors out there who don't really give a shit.
In the Arrow game sector, you get the game for free, and then there's some sketchy site you can get a bunch of DLC from it that's the real spicy stuff. But that's not an overall market solution, and obviously there's been a chilling effect here. There's a humongous, I mean, just false positive rate that has hurt so many developers. And it just erodes confidence in the market. And that is bad for the industry as a whole. This is obviously not a viable situation. Players and platforms are looking for solutions. And the good news is, next time, we'll take a look at what the industry has proposed to fix this entire goddamn mess.